The wilderness is home to predators. They are ferocious and cunning, aggressive and mad. Humans who wish to establish a foothold in the wilderness must take a tough stance and protect themselves with guns. These brave humans are known as mountain men. However, in recent years, with a surge in predator numbers, the situation for the mountain men has become increasingly dire. Both humans and animals want to defend what belongs to them, leading to more frequent conflicts. In Alaska, Morgan risks a trip to a small island in Kodiak to stock up on food for the upcoming winter. The island is rich in fish but also home to brown bears. The Alaskan brown bears, weighing up to 1,500 pounds, primarily feed on fish, which is also Morgan's target. This places him directly in competition for food. Annually, millions of fish migrate from the ocean to inland to spawn, one of the largest migrations on Earth. If Morgan can seize this opportunity, he can secure high-quality protein for the coming months. Carrying his family's hopes, he sets foot on the island, where the forest is noticeably denser and the dangers greater. Morgan immediately draws his handgun, fills it with bullets, and, once ready, enters the woods with his backpack, looking for a safe campsite. The scenery is unexpectedly beautiful. While admiring it, Morgan soon spots a large rocky area, an ideal natural shelter for him. To prevent bears from targeting his food, he hangs his backpack high on a large tree. Afterward, he heads to the river to fish. The nearest stream is 2 miles north. Upon arrival, he stops, sensing an eerie atmosphere. Looking around, he locks eyes with a brown bear, and behind it, another bear appears. Sweating with fear, Morgan realizes he's facing a mother bear with 3 cubs, the most dangerous kind of bear. He chooses to retreat, holding his handgun firmly. If the bear charges, he won't hesitate to shoot. Perhaps sensing Morgan's resolve, the bear simply watches him. Once the situation calms, the bear and her cubs leave. Morgan then puts away his gun and goes to the stream to try fishing. This man was fishing in a rapid stream, but before the fish bit, the local boss arrived first. It swayed its large rear as it swaggered over, showing no fear of the hunter because it had another helper. Facing 2 bears was too dangerous, so Morgan had no choice but to retreat. Seeing the hunter back down, the brown bear did not charge, but kept its gaze fixed on Morgan until he completely disappeared from sight. This troubled Morgan because he realized the area was overrun with brown bears, making finding a quiet fishing spot nearly impossible. Now, during the salmon spawning season, every brown bear was waiting for a tasty buffet, unwilling to give up their spot. After searching for a while, Morgan finally found an open area unguarded by brown bears and immediately began fishing. Soon, a fish bit. It was very lively, struggling intensely. Morgan glanced at it, but released it back into the water because after spawning, the fish would slowly die. This type of fish, known as a zombie fish, is very tough to eat, and this particular fish was a dying zombie fish. Morgan's aim was the salmon moving upstream, while most fish in the stream were zombie fish. Therefore, to fulfill his 50-pound goal, he needed some luck, and the key was the coho salmon. Unlike the salmon that had finished spawning, the spawning season for coho salmon was just beginning, and their meat was very delicious. Soon, another fish took the bait. Its enormous strength bent the fishing rod into an exaggerated angle. From its jumps, Morgan could tell it was a coho salmon, giving him boundless motivation. He exerted all his strength to fling the fish onto the shore. This coho salmon fit his needs perfectly, marking his first catch. The feeling was fantastic, as if it unlocked his energy pathways. Morgan grew more vigorous, pulling one fish after another onto the shore. Unfortunately, dusk was approaching, a prime time for brown bears to hunt. Reluctantly, he had to stop fishing and try to return to camp before dark. The first day's catch was satisfying. The man slid a sharp knife into the belly of a large fish, gently slicing it open from end to end. To avoid bringing the scent of blood back to camp, Morgan cleaned the fish's guts by the shore and then split the fish down the middle. Each fish weighed about 5 pounds. He placed these fish into a bag for smoking later, which would allow for long-term storage. He planned to continue fishing the next day. The night passed quietly. The next day, Morgan returned to the creek full of hope, but he stopped in his tracks when he saw a brown bear occupying his spot, with 5 more nearby. Their menacing presence was enough to deter him, so Morgan moved upstream to find a safer fishing spot. The island was home to over 1,000 brown bears, mostly concentrated around the creek. He kept vigilant as he searched and reached a wide area of the river where there were no bears, so he immediately began fishing. The creek was teeming with fish, and it wasn't long before he had a bite. Despite the fish's vigorous struggle, Morgan gradually reeled it in. It was a coho salmon, exactly what he was after. He quickly ended its life with one cut, then continued fishing. The catch was just beginning. Soon after, he hooked a second and then a third fish. However, the more fish he caught, the more dangerous his situation became due to the strong fishy smell attracting bears. He kept a lookout while hurriedly fishing. At this point, fishing technique was unnecessary. Simply casting the line resulted in bites. In a short time, he had caught 5 fish. It was now time to leave. Over 2 days, he had caught nearly 50 pounds of salmon, meeting his goal. Now it was time to smoke the fish. He built a frame over a fire using wood and covered it with a tent material to trap the smoke. He hung the prepared salmon on the frame. Smoking usually took about 3 hours. If all went well, he would be able to take these smoked fish home today. 3 hours later, Morgan packed the smoked fish into his backpack and set off on the 2-mile trek back. He remained vigilant, knowing his backpack carried delicious food. At a creek, he encountered 3 bear cubs. To avoid trouble, he detoured. The curious cubs looked on with innocent expressions, but Morgan did not stop to admire them and quickly left the area. The rest of the journey was uneventful, but when he reached the coast, he realized he was not at his original disembarking point. Fortunately, he had brought an inflatable raft and had made wooden paddles, which he used to row to the rendezvous. The ship was waiting there, and now Morgan could finally go home. A deadly forest fire swept through Montana, destroying everything in its path. Despite efforts from planes battling the blaze, the situation has not improved. The fire is now approaching Tom's territory, filling the air with smoke. Tom has a friend whose house has already been destroyed. He is rushing over to try and salvage some belongings from the ashes. Mark, also a hunter, lost his cabin in the woods to the fire within minutes 4 days ago. Fortunately, he was not injured, but his home now only exists in photographs. Viewing the ruins, Mark feels incredibly heavy-hearted. Tom continuously encourages him to stay strong as they attempt to salvage anything from the wreckage. They gather tools that seem usable, but the fire's devastation is so severe that they find almost nothing intact. Tom empathizes deeply, especially since the fire is spreading toward his own forest, now only 10 miles away. He is extremely worried. Soon, Tom finds an axe in the ruins that could be usable with a new handle. This discovery lifts their spirits, suggesting other metal items might also be intact. Mark's greatest hope is to find his steel traps. As an experienced hunter, having his trapping tools would mean he could rebuild his livelihood. Unfortunately, his 2 rifles were destroyed. However, under a piece of metal, he finds his first trap, and nearby, a second one. They quickly check the springs, relieved to find they still work. Tom intends to continue helping, but a sudden change in wind direction raises concerns for his wife's safety at home. He bids his friend farewell and drives home. The smoke grows denser along the way. At home, he selects essential tools from the shed while Nancy gathers important documents. They prepare to evacuate in case the fire reaches them. Planes continue to fight the fire as they anxiously wait. Then, Nancy notices it's starting to rain. The couple is nearly overwhelmed with relief. The timely rain means the fire will likely be extinguished soon, and they can save their property. The raging forest fire finally dies down, but it leaves behind over 1 million acres of devastated land and dozens of destroyed homes. Tom is fortunate to escape the calamity, but his friend Mark has lost everything. As the cold winter approached, the 2 men went into the mountains to hunt for food to last through the season. Their target was a plump elk, as an adult male elk can provide up to 100 pounds of meat, enough to sustain Mark's family until spring. However, the recent forest fire likely affected the wildlife, causing them to flee the area. To increase their chances of success, they ventured deeper into the Sawtooth Mountains, reaching elevations as high as 10,000 feet, where the terrain is rugged, a significant physical challenge. Tom, older and less fit, collapsed from exhaustion and needed a break. Using binoculars, they scanned for signs of elk, and soon Mark excitedly spotted a few, about 3 miles away. Despite the short distance, navigating the rugged highlands was challenging. They kept a vigilant watch as they followed, ensuring they did not lose sight of their quarry. A major challenge awaited them: a descent into a 150-foot canyon. They carefully made their way down, with Tom taking it slow to avoid aggravating an old knee injury. At the bottom of the canyon, they found fresh hoof prints indicating that the elk had just passed through. The climb out was strenuous, almost causing Mark to fall. It took considerable effort, using both hands and feet, but they managed to climb up. Without resting, they continued to follow the trail left by the elk. After a while, they spotted an animal resembling an elk and stopped to observe it with binoculars. The angle was poor, but once the elk moved, they confirmed their target. They quickly followed it up to a mountaintop, only to lose sight of it. They had to rely on their experience to track it, but as daylight faded over the Sawtooth Mountains, they had to accept that hunting was not possible for the day. They reached their truck only after dark. To help his friend through tough times, Tom decided to share some of the bison meat he had hunted the previous year. In the Blue Ridge Mountains, Eustace was engulfed in profound grief. His business partner, Preston, had passed away from cancer at the age of 60. Although 3 months had gone by, Eustace was still struggling to move on from his sorrow. However, life had to continue, and Preston's son and grandson were ready to take over his duties. Thus, Eustace needed to guide them in the right direction. They were now working on repairing a hunting platform to prepare for deer hunting, a tradition Eustace upheld each year before winter to secure high-quality protein. The old tree stand they were fixing was one Preston had designed years ago to teach his young son how to hunt. Seeing it again brought back memories. The group began their work by hammering long iron nails into the tree trunk to provide a foothold, then securing wooden planks to the structure. Eustace watched with satisfaction as the young men, strong and capable, handled the physical work with ease. Out of respect for Preston, they decided not to alter the original design. The final step was to camouflage the tree stand to make it blend in with the leafy branches, making it look more natural. It was at this moment that Eustace realized mentoring the next generation was also a joyful task. He decided to share all his knowledge with them. Preston's grandson, Tanner, who was 5 years old, was participating in his first hunt today. Eustace's first lesson was to think like an animal, imagining oneself as a deer looking for delicious food. Where would it go? They roamed the woods, laughter echoing around them. After tiring from playing, they began the hunt. Eustace gave the young hunters the platform and hid in a concealed spot. Hunting required patience. Suddenly, a gunshot shattered the quiet of the woods. Eustace chuckled, anticipating a successful catch. When he reached the spot, he was surprised to find a deer already downed. He generously praised the hunters, proud of Preston's lineage for their remarkable talent. Now they were ready to head home and enjoy some grilled meat. Here in the beautiful and pristine Ozark Mountains, there is a tradition. Whenever a child is born, parents build a primitive dwelling called a hogan. This is a very important ceremony. Jason has just welcomed his second child, and Mary is looking forward to giving birth in the cabin, symbolizing the continuation of tradition. However, Jason faces the tough task of building it alone. He sketches the outline of the house on wooden planks and consults his wife's suggestions. Once confirmed, he proceeds with the work. The first step is constructing a base, using a method where one ring of logs encircles another, gradually building up the walls and securing them with thick iron nails. As time passes, the cabin takes shape, but lifting logs weighing 100 pounds each becomes a challenge. Any carelessness could lead to accidents, so Jason must be extremely cautious. While Jason is busy, Mary isn't idle either. She prepares a clay mixture for sealing, made of sand, clay, and lime. Adding water, she mixes it into cement, which has excellent waterproofing properties. Before using it, Mary fills the larger gaps with straw. The day's hard work seems to take a toll as Mary suddenly feels discomfort in her stomach. Her attentive husband immediately notices and comes over to check on her. She experiences some cramps, and Jason helps her back to the house. Their baby is due in 3 weeks, but the early contractions suggest a change of plans might be necessary. Jason calls a midwife to examine Mary. After checking, the midwife concludes that Mary is healthy and not at risk of premature labor. It was a false alarm, but a wake-up call for Jason to hasten the house building. To speed up the process, he invites a professional carpenter, Johann. The most challenging part of the project is constructing the hogan's roof. It requires multiple intersecting logs to taper as they ascend. After Jason explains the requirements, Johann understands and they get to work. The roof, like a spider web, gradually comes together. After some time, the roof is nearly finished, leaving a skylight as a vent for the stovepipe. They place the stove in the center, assemble the stovepipe, and test it out. The results are satisfactory. Although the house still needs finishing touches, it's already shaping up well, easing their worries. The baby was premature. Jason was outside boiling water when he suddenly heard his wife screaming in pain. Her water had broken, and the baby was about to be born. They were in the Ozark Mountains, and today, Mary felt like she was going to give birth. To call the midwife urgently, Jason drove to higher ground where there was a signal. The nearest hospital was 75 miles away. If the midwife couldn't arrive in time, Mary would have to give birth alone. The midwife was on her way, and in the meantime, Jason needed to make some preparations while Mary's labor progressed more frequently. Jason entered the cabin they had built, a traditional Native American structure. He lit candles throughout, bringing light to the space, and stoked the stove to warm the cabin. Mary waited anxiously inside. Outside, Jason lit a bonfire to boil a pot of water, preparing thoroughly for the birth. An hour passed quickly as Jason helped Mary walk to the cabin where her contractions had intensified to every 3 minutes. They could no longer wait. Fortunately, everything was ready inside the cabin. Mary adjusted her state through deep breathing. As Jason went outside to check on the hot water, he suddenly heard his wife calling out. Her water had broken and the child was about to be born. Just as Jason felt overwhelmed, the midwife arrived and took over. Mary was in pain, but as a mother, she bravely persevered. After some time, a healthy baby girl was born. Mary cried tears of joy. It was a painful yet blissful process. Jason was profoundly grateful for his wife's endurance and named their baby Madeleine. The midwife carefully checked all the baby's vital signs, which were excellent. Seeing such a tiny, delicate infant melted Jason's heart. It was the continuation of life. When their elder daughter came home from school and saw her adorable sister, she couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The family sat together, enjoying this rare moment of joy. The elder daughter hugged her sister and gave her a kiss. Witnessing this scene filled Jason with immense happiness. After many years of wandering, he finally felt rooted and settled. This was the life he had always dreamed of. The man pulled out a blue pistol and shot a raccoon out of a tree in western Montana. Jake, a 28-year-old cougar hunter new to the profession, quickly made a name for himself and earned the trust of local ranchers. In recent years, the increasing number of wolves and cougars, driven by scarce food, has frequently threatened livestock, making Jake's job demanding. Last year alone, he drove away 19 cougars, a disconcerting figure. Jake's success lies in his pack of hunting dogs, rigorously trained to work together against cougars. Today, they were out tracking prey again. One of the dogs found a trail in the muddy bank that looked like it was from a raccoon, one of the hardest animals to track due to their small paws and minimal scent left behind. A real test for the dogs' noses. Jake quietly observed the dogs, using the hunt as training. Henry, the 8-year-old lead dog, was Jake's most reliable tracker and the first dog he trained. Now in his prime, Henry was fully capable of handling a lynx alone. Suddenly, the dogs picked up speed and started barking loudly, signaling they had found their target. Jake hurried to catch up and soon spotted the dogs again, along with a raccoon cornered in a tree. Brave Henry was staring intently at it from below. Concerned Henry might fall, Jake quickly ran over and reluctantly pulled him down, securing him before tying up the other dogs. The raccoon looked bewildered, watching the intruders closely. Marlin, the youngest dog at just 3 months old, showed exceptional talent from a young age, so Jake brought him along for focused training. Now was the time. Jake pulled out his blue pistol and shot the raccoon in the tree. He skinned it with a knife, threaded its tail with a rope, and dragged it to a large tree where he hung it up. He then released the dogs to observe their tracking skills. In no time, the dogs found their target. By the time Jake caught up, they were tearing at the raccoon's tail. Jake was very pleased with their performance. With such fierce dogs, he had little to worry about in handling big challenges. The cougar, usually the dominant predator in the mountains, rarely has any natural enemies. However, today, one was driven up a tree by a hunter who was repeatedly hitting the tree with a stick and verbally cursing at the cougar. This infuriated the cougar, but it dared not retaliate easily because of the fierce hunting dogs below. This took place in Montana's Ruby Valley. Jake, a cougar hunter, had cornered this particular cougar after it trespassed onto a rancher's land, committing a serious offense. However, because cougars are protected by local laws, Jake could not kill it. Instead, he had to intimidate the cougar to drive it back deep into the mountains. Jake secured his dogs to give the cougar a chance to escape. The cougar, very intelligent, seized the opportunity to leap from the tree and ran away like the wind. Jake quickly released the dogs to continue the pursuit. After repeating this process 2 or 3 times, the cougar would develop a psychological fear and dare not come down from the mountains again. Jake ran energetically, relying on his youthful strength. His reckless tactics quickly built his reputation, and he was highly trusted by local ranchers. Unfortunately, he still couldn't keep up with the pace of the dogs. Moreover, he discovered wolf tracks in the snow. Unlike the cougar, wolves could actually kill hunting dogs. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jake used his GPS to locate the dogs about a half-mile away in rugged terrain, growing concerned for their safety. To reach them quickly, he took a bold leap downhill and fortunately was not injured. Calling for his dogs as he moved forward, he eventually heard them responding. The first dog ran to him when it heard his call. Jake secured it and continued searching. He found 2 dogs and was left looking for the last one. After more calls, the final dog also appeared. Jake prepared to feed and water them, planning to spend the night outdoors. They would continue tracking the cougar once daylight returned. Dawn broke again, and Jake had spent the night outdoors with his 3 hunting dogs. Now rested, they were ready to continue driving the cougar away. Yesterday, Jake and his team had chased a cougar that had intruded into a local ranch, and they were now about 7 miles from the ranch. This distance was not far enough, so today their goal was to instill fear in the cougar once more. The tracks left by the cougar were over 12 hours old, but the dogs' noses were sensitive enough to still pick up the lingering scent in the air. Suddenly, the situation changed. The lead dog, Henry, broke away from the team and ran in a different direction. Jake hurried to follow, needing to understand what was happening. Hunting dogs are trained to work as a team, but they might split up if they detect additional predators. Henry was an independent dog, brave enough to confront a cougar alone. However, cougars are much stronger, and if it came to a fight, Henry would be at a disadvantage. As Jake ran, he finally heard Henry's barking again, and the scene that unfolded before him made his pupils dilate. Henry was confronting a lynx, which was creeping closer, step by step. A fight seemed imminent, and Jake sprinted towards them like an arrow. Although smaller, lynxes are fiercely aggressive, and their sharp teeth and claws could severely injure a hunting dog. Jake's loud calls inadvertently exposed a vulnerability in Henry, and the lynx pounced decisively. Jake was shocked, but fortunately, the lynx only climbed a tree. It looked down awkwardly while Jake checked Henry for injuries. Apart from a few scratches, there were no serious wounds, so Jake led Henry away to continue tracking the cougar, wondering about the condition of the other 2 dogs. When he found the dogs again, they had successfully cornered the cougar up a tree. Jake carefully confirmed that it was indeed the same cougar from yesterday. He believed that after these 2 chases, the cougar would no longer dare to come down from the mountains. This was Jake's objective, and now that the task was complete, it was time to head home with the dogs. He planned to share the good news with the rancher and ask him to help place an advertisement. Snow and ice have once again descended on the land of Alaska, bringing with them bitterly cold weather. Since moving here, Morgan has been working hard to adapt to life. Now, 3 years later, it's time to add a practical tool to his arsenal: an airplane. Last summer, he and his girlfriend Marg both obtained their pilot licenses and accumulated 160 hours of flying experience. However, they had never flown in snowy conditions, which due to unique environmental factors, turned flying from a simple task to a nightmare. To prepare, Morgan hired an experienced instructor. They agreed to practice flying on a wide lake surface the next day. So now, he was heading to that lake to spend the night there, while Marg stayed home to look after the livestock. Once Morgan mastered the skills, it would be Marg's turn to learn. After traveling for a while, Morgan finally arrived at the lake. With daylight fading, he needed to build a shelter. In such snowy conditions, the ideal solution was to dig a snow cave. After searching, he found a good spot in the woods. To measure the depth of the snow, He chopped down a small tree and stuck it into the snow. Unfortunately, the snow was only 4 feet deep, insufficient for a snow cave. However, Morgan had a solution. He pulled over his sled, placed his backpack on top, and started to pile up the snow around them. Once he had a mound about his height, he used a shovel to pack the snow tightly to prevent any collapse, which could be disastrous if it occurred while he was sleeping. He couldn't afford to be careless. The next step was to dig the cave, but first, he needed to collect a bunch of sticks and poke them into the mound. Each stick was about a foot long, serving as a guide for when he dug from the inside. If he hit the tip of a stick, it meant he had dug enough. With preparations complete, he began to dig. As night approached, the temperature dropped rapidly, which helped harden the snow but also made it colder. After some time, he had carved out a livable space inside the cave. He laid down a blanket, lit a candle, and enjoyed a candle-lit dinner before settling down to sleep. The next day dawned, and Morgan emerged from his snow cave ready to attend his extreme flight training session. The plane arrived on time, and seeing the pilot land smoothly filled Morgan with envy. Although he had earned his pilot's license during the summer, he was unable to fly in the icy Alaskan conditions, which is why he had hired an experienced instructor. Without wasting any time, the two of them boarded the aircraft and started the engine. The pilot explained each step and operated the controls slowly, making sure Morgan noticed every detail. Once confident, they officially took off. Morgan, initially nervous, managed the takeoff himself. His nerves settled as they soared, and he felt a rush of triumph while admiring Alaska's stunning landscapes. The real challenge in flying, however, was in landing. Many pilots have perished during this phase because instead of wheels, the plane had skis. Choosing the right landing spot, typically a broad lake surface, was crucial. The plane needed to touch down gradually and parallel to the ground to avoid collisions. Despite understanding the theory, Morgan found the practical execution challenging. After failing to land successfully 3 times, they had to take off again. The pilot advised him to relax and decrease the plane's speed ahead of time, then gently landed on the ground. This time, Morgan managed a smooth landing on the lake surface. He was determined to master all the flying techniques that day. The next challenge was landing in areas shadowed by mountains, where low light made it difficult to see the snow conditions and judge distances accurately. Morgan was extremely cautious, but still made a mistake on his first landing, which disrupted his rhythm. Cursing under his breath, he took off again. He removed his sunglasses, feeling they were of no help. Perhaps this was the key to unlocking his potential. Inspired, Morgan landed smoothly on his next attempt. The third lesson was about engine failure in midair. Morgan learned how to rescue himself in freefall by leveling the plane to slow its descent, quickly restarting the engine, and then hoping for the best. Through today's lessons, Morgan quickly mastered many skills and now felt confident about flying the plane. In the Blue Ridge Mountains, Eustace rode his horse to a junkyard to find a truck. Last year, his truck was completely wrecked due to forgetting to engage the parking brake, and his business partner, Preston, passed away from illness. These setbacks made his year challenging, so he needed a new truck to help him overcome these difficulties. The junkyard, owned by a friend named Dean, was filled with various discarded vehicles. Eustace had a budget of $800 and was looking for the best value for his money. He spotted a red truck that seemed promising. Upon opening the hood, he found an engine but no battery. However, finding a battery among so many vehicles wasn't difficult. He quickly found one, installed it, and was ready to start the truck. To his surprise, the truck had no seats, but he decided to see if it would start anyway. After stepping on the clutch and turning the key, the truck roared to life and it felt powerful. Eustace couldn't help but smile, pleased with the truck's performance. He called over Dean to discuss the price, which Dean set at $1,000, stumping Eustace. He began to point out the truck's flaws. It was beat up and it lacked both tires and seats. He wanted to negotiate the price down. Dean, however, highlighted the truck's advantage. It had a hydraulic lift bed. Eustace was stunned. This feature was exactly what he needed to save time when unloading logs, a tool he desperately needed. Knowing Eustace didn't have much money, Dean proposed a trade. He needed some lumber to build a small structure. They agreed on a deal, but the truck still needed seats and wheels. The two searched the junkyard and quickly found suitable tires and installed them. They then found a seat and fitted it into the truck. Now, Eustace could head home. On his way, He discovered a hole in the floor, so fixing it became his first task at home. He measured the hole, found a lid from an oil drum, and used a blowtorch to modify it. After sanding it down, he secured it in place under his feet, effectively repairing the floor. Eustace then loaded some lumber to deliver to Dean, completing their trade.